switching our focus to the northern arena. Lebanese media reported on Saturday evening about an attack attributed to Israeli forces directed at a Hezbollah vehicle in the town of Yater in southern Lebanon. According to the reports, an Israeli UAV struck the vehicle, resulting in 2 casualties, one of whom, a Hezbollah terrorist, was eliminated. And elsewhere, the United States has issued an ultimatum to Lebanon to act immediately against Hezbollah in the south or risk Israeli military action. At the same time, the United States is promoting direct diplomatic talks between the two countries, Israel and Lebanon. And according to a report in the Saudi-owned El Arabiya news portal, senior officials in the White House and the State Department clarified to the Lebanese government that President Donald Trump wants to see results in a very short time. There is no time to waste, and progress must be achieved in the Lebanon-Israel relations that can be announced within a few weeks. It is notable that there is a clear threat that Trump will allow extensive Israeli military operations in Lebanon if the required results are not achieved, and the El Arabiya report makes that very, very clear. However, the newly formed Lebanese government faces significant challenges given the tight schedule set by the United States. The new leadership needs time to reorganize its security and military systems and establish its authority throughout the Lebanese territory. And recently, Morgan Ortagus, the Deputy Special Envoy to the Middle East, announced that the United States will convene Lebanon and Israel for dedicated diplomatic talks to resolve outstanding issues. And according to El Arabiya, the United States intends to organize working groups led by diplomats. This is a move not seen in the relations between the two countries since 1992. The report adds that there are 3 main American demands. One is preventing the smuggling of weapons or funds through ports and borders to Hezbollah, stable deployment for the Lebanese army in the south, and the beginning of dismantling Hezbollah's military capabilities in Lebanese territory beyond the Litani River. Alongside these demands, the United States has approved $95 million in military aid to Lebanon. A State Department spokesperson emphasized that strengthening the army and helping establish Lebanese sovereignty along the southern Litani is the only possible solution for security and stability in this region. Here at TV in Israel, we will continue to report on every development in this sector. And now it's time to turn things over to our senior Middle East analyst, Mati Shoshani, who will take us through what's happening in our neighborhood. And this time on the agenda is a meeting between Russia, China, and Iran. Trump is presenting on the one hand a military threat and on the other a call for an agreement. Let's make sense of all of this.
Thank you, Yair. If you have the sense that something is off with the news that's coming out of the Middle East, that the headlines are repetitive the last couple of weeks, well, you're exactly correct. We're right now in this very bizarre position where things have been sort of in this sticky situation where the US, Russia agenda, the Saudis, the Iranians, Israel, Hamas, nothing has really been moving for several weeks in this region. For several weeks now, the Trump administration has been pushing on the Iranians, and they've been pushing with one of 2 agendas. One agenda is, we're going for a full military strike. That's something that they've discussed publicly, that engages also the Israeli, specifically Air Force or Defense Forces, in combating the Iranian push for a nuclear bomb. But then there's a whole other side of things that is also unique. The American government has been working hand in hand with the Russians to pressure the Iranians. The Trump administration has actually said, we'd rather have an agreement than a military option. But the military option is also on the table. So it's a very interesting tactic here in the negotiation where the Americans are pushing for an agreement. They're involving also the Russians in that. And then in a greater scheme of things, saying that yes, there is another option on the table. There's a lot of moving parts in the Middle East right now. When you take into account the fact that we have Hamas that is needing another round of agreements or another ceasefire season between Israel and them. You talk about Hezbollah, where it's a story that is not fully finished. You talk about the fact, or think about the fact that the Iranians, through their Houthi proxies, are still engaged in proxy warfare in the Middle East. We're still in a place where there are a lot of plates that are spinning, and the U.S. administration trying to reshape politics and geopolitics in this region needs to put an end to some of these issues before it can move on to take care of the next. Something worth noting is the fact that the US is not shy about using power. Just the other night, we used power against Houthi rebels in the Middle East, coming out of Yemen, of course, and an official statement was made by the American government saying, hey guys, if you think you can continue to destabilize, we're going to show you that we're not okay with that. But here's another really interesting piece. China. The US is not only dealing with the Iranian issue and trying to rebuild and reshuffle power balances here in the Middle East, it's also trying to reshape the next big conflict, which is US relations, Chinese and the South China Sea, and specifically with a topic called Taiwan. And that's where things get incredibly interesting. The US, together with Russia, is trying to reshape their relationship with the Chinese. And at the same time, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians are having their own powwow sessions in Beijing over this last week, talking about how they resist the American pressure or the American axis of pressure on them. So this is happening at the same time. The Russians are playing a very interesting game here. They're negotiating between the American interest and between, of course, Russian and then Chinese interest, all at the same time trying to gain power, gain control over this part of the world. And that's really the story of the Middle East. There is no situation where it's in black and white conversation. There's always multiple facets taking place at the same time. Israel is in a unique place right now. We're waiting on an agreement to take place here. The reason we're waiting on an agreement is because we don't have another round of ceasefire and hostage exchange with the Hamas terrorists. What we have right now is sort of a phase 1.something, 1.2, 1.3, where we're discussing a release of hostages, but it never really takes us to the place where we're supposed to be, which is ending the conflict altogether with Hamas and exchanging all the hostages. This is the topic that never leaves the discussion table in Israel, especially when it comes to the public forum of public pressure on the government to release those hostages. That's a big topic: hostages, Hamas, Israel. There's another one. How do we stabilize Syria and what's been going on there? How do we stabilize Lebanon and the Hezbollah agenda within Lebanon that's being pushed back by international aid that's trying to raise another government that is an alternative to them? So again, a lot of moving pieces in this region, and none of it is enough to really end this situation all at once. So what the US administration is trying to do is trying to end one topic at a time, take it off the table, take the discussion topic off the table, end the Hamas discussion. They're putting a lot of pressure through their emissary Hochstein to do that, end the Hezbollah discussion, and stabilize Lebanon in a way that we can move on to a place where Iran isn't involved in that. And then again, same with Syria, stabilize that. So the El Julani government, that's been, for lack of a better word, massacring the Alawite minority in the country, is able to stabilize the government, stop the acts of violence, and sort of write off that topic and move on to the next. And the end game, of course, is stabilizing the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. That means stabilizing relationships with Iran, the Saudis, and everything that happens with trade in this region. And the way to get to that is or an agreement, or maximum military pressure on the Iranians, or both at the same time. And Russia is a pivotal piece in that entire relationship. All in all, my prayer, my effort is, my hope is for our government, the US government, and others in this region, is that what we're able to do is eliminate Iranian aggression, is to push them back and stop their financial machine that spreads terrorism throughout this region. 2, to strengthen ties between the US, the Saudis, and Israel. 3, to end the relationship or this conflict phase with Hamas and exchange the hostages. And the last part is, for the US government, there's a need to pray and think about how they change the situation where the Russians are now a force of good in this region rather than part of the destabilizing forces. There is a lot of work at hand. There's a lot of tricky and moving pieces, and it takes an incredible amount of wisdom and long-term planning to be able to see this into the next phase that will bring stability and good news to the people of this region. And God only knows that's what everyone here deserves. The people of Israel deserve it, the people of Gaza deserve it, the people of Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and every other country deserve the forces of radical Islam to be pushed back and the forces of stability, trade, cooperation, and peace to be the ones that take over the public discourse. That's it for now. Back to Yael Pinto.